You can't see my face, can you? Can you? I hope you can. Well, all right, let's begin. Hopefully this is 30 minutes. Okay, 5:52. So at 5 at 5:23. Okay, cool. Three, two, one. Hello. My name is Mohammed Guy, and today I'll be presenting on Parkinson's disease, from a cognitive neuroscience perspective. Parkinson's impacts emotion, motivation, and cognition, all of which tie into what we study in neuroscience, in my cognitive neuroscience class. And over the next 25 to 30 minutes, I'm going to walk through what Parkinson's disease is, its symptoms, and progression, what we know about its causes, and what current research, including animal studies, revealing about treatment, and prevention. And I'll also talk about how scientists use non-human animal models ethically, following APA research standards. And by the end, you'll have a full picture of both what Parkinson's does to the brain and how future research is giving us hope for better treatment and maybe even prevention one day. So let's get into it. So this is kind of a roadmap for what I'm going to talk about. So first, I'll describe the disease, its symptoms, how it progresses, how common it is. Then I'll move into the main brain areas affected and the biological causes that contribute to Parkinson's. Um, then I'll move on to summarize a research study using non-human animals to better understand Parkinson's, understand their brains, Parkinson's in, or testing non-human animals to see how what we can learn about Parkinson's for us humans. Next, I'll summarize. Um, finally, I'll wrap it up with future goals for human treatments, and what scientists are currently focusing on to slow or stop the disease. And basically, we're moving from understanding what Parkinson's is to why it happens and finally to what we can do about it. Okay, so what is Parkinson's disease? Um, we kind of always hear it, but we don't really know what it is. I mean, I didn't know what it was before I learned it. I've always heard about it. I knew it was a disease, but I didn't know really deep down what it really was and what it did. But Parkinson's disease is a progressive neurodegenerative de oh my gosh, degenerative disorder that mainly affects movement, but it also influences behavior and thinking. According to Gazzaniga, Ivry, and Mangoon in Cognitive Neuroscience, The Biology of the Mind, Parkinson's happens when dopamine producing neurons in an area called the substantia nigra start to die off. When that dopamine supply decreases, the communication between the basal ganglia and the motor cortex breaks down, which leads to classical movement symptoms, things like slowed movement, muscle rigidity, I cannot speak today, and resting tremors. Cooley and colleagues in 2018 explained that this dopamine loss doesn't always happen at once. It's gradual. It's not a linear line. It's not like whoop and everything's there. Like it takes time. It happens. It takes time it takes time. Oh my gosh. Um, but by the time someone's diagnosed, they've usually already lost more than half of their dopamine neurons in that region. So Parkinson's isn't really about just the shaking or the stiffness. It's about like how deep brain circuits fail to send the right signals, the right neurons to make dopamine to control movement. Okay. So some symptoms about Parkinson's. When Parkinson first appears, most people notice motor symptoms like tremors in one hand, slower movement, and stiffness in their arms or legs. But something that's really interesting, and that Cooley and Gazzaniga both point out, is that non-motor symptoms often come years before that, like a long time before that. These things include like loss of smell, constipation, disrupted sleep, and even like mild anxiety or depression. These early warning signs are what doctors now call the prodromal phase of Parkinson's. So by the time the tremors do appear, the disease has already been developing quietly in the brain for a while. This gradual onset is part of what makes early detection so difficult, and why scientists are so focused on finding biomarkers that can identify it sooner. So it's like you don't really know until it's there. So that's why it's so hard to fight it because you don't know what's there. You can't fight what you don't know. So overall, the combination of both the motor and non-motor symptoms really shows that Parkinson's affects more than just the movement centers of the brain. It affects everything. It affects your whole life. Okay. So once diagnosed, Parkinson's usually progresses slowly over many years. The Owen and Yar scale are Yar scale. I probably should have searched that up. I had to sum that out before I started my presentation. I'll talk about that. Breaks this progression into five stages. It starts with mild one-sided symptoms, then moves to both sides of the body. And then over time, balance becomes harder to maintain and daily tasks take longer. In the later stages, walking and standing becomes difficult, and some people eventually need full-time assistance. According to Cooley and colleagues, the average time from diagnosis to severe disability is about 15 to 20-ish years, give or take, meaning it's not immediately going to kill you, it's not immediately life-threatening, but it is lifelong and progressively disabling. And people you don't usually die directly from Parkinson's itself. I mean, later you do just because of age, but like when it's first diagnosed, it's usually from complications from like falls or pneumonia, things like that. It's never really the disease itself versus like cancer, which is typically the disease itself because it attacks your body. But Parkinson's attacks your body, but it's really like the side effects from it that really people die from. And understanding how the disease evolves over time helps guide treatment goals, like focusing early on symptom management and later on maintaining independence and quality of life, things like that. Okay, so moving on to how common Parkinson's is, and what it means for people's lives. Um, According to Cooley and colleagues, about 1% of people over the age of 60 have Parkinson's disease, have Parkinson's disease, and over 10 million people worldwide are living with it. Men are slightly more at risk than women are, and the probability increases as we age. For individuals and families, the impact is huge. I mean, think about it. Like any disease, even when you have a cold, people around you are affected. I mean, COVID, everyone was affected. Jobs will be lost. Jobs may be lost or changed. Daily tasks like brushing your teeth or eating fruity pebbles in the morning are going to become so difficult. Driving may be unsafe with all that shaking and muscle stiffness. And just like the people around you like face that emotional like strain. And your caregivers, whoever's taking care of you, they have to dedicate their whole life to solely taking care of you. And that has a toll on people. Um, and financially, that financial strain. I mean, you can't work. The person that's taking care of you has to pay for everything. Um, it doesn't Parkinson's is dangerous because it doesn't only affect you, or it doesn't only affect the patient. It affects everyone around the patient, every single person. And that's why it's frustrating. It is frustrating. But understanding these population and personal dimensions help us to appreciate why research into prevention and better therapies is so urgent. That's why we need to get on this. I mean, that's why I'm talking about it to you. It's huge. It's huge. Okay, so brain areas affected. So which brain regions are involved in Parkinson's? The big one is the substantia nigra. It's in part of the midbrain region, full of dopamine producing neurons. And later in this presentation, I'm going to show you the substantia nigra and how it looks Parkinson's patient versus a normal person. This essential nodule is full of dopamine producing neurons. Basically, in Parkinson's, those neurons start dying off, which reduces the dopamine available to the striatum and disrupts the cortical striatal cortical loops. That is a lot of words that regulate movement and other functions. There's also accumulation of asynclein protein in so-called Lewy bodies that spread through multiple networks throughout the brain. And that's why not only movement, but cognition and mood are also or can also be impacted. So when we talk about Parkinson's, we're talking about a breakdown of networks, not just one isolated structure. It's not just movement, it's everything. Okay. So causes and risk factors. So why does Parkinson's happen in the first place? Like what? The short answer, we don't know. We really don't know. We don't know exactly. But we do know a lot of things that contribute. Age is the biggest risk factor. Genetic variants like L or LRRK2 is what I like to say for short, but LRRK2, GBA1, and SNCA play a role in some cases. Exposure to environmental toxins such as certain pesticides and solvents, just the environment around you can have a factor, can be a factor. Those are strongly implicated. Cooley describes this as a multi-hit hypothesis. Genes, toxins, and aging all combine to, I mean, lead to it eventually. So it's not just one trigger, it's kind of everything, it's a combination. And recognizing this complexity is a key to thinking about how we might prevent or slow the disease. Okay, so can we prevent Parkinson's? No. Short, no, we can't. Not fully yet. But there are promising things happening. Like regular exercise appears to slow progression in observational studies. Early detection of non-motor symptoms gives a chance to intervene sooner, and avoiding known toxins like certain pesticides, like I said before, may reduce risk. However, as Collie and his team pointed out, we don't know yet. Um, we don't yet have, like, we don't know really, but we don't yet have a proven prevention strategy that works across the population. I mean, everyone's different, but these protective factors give us hope and direction for research and public health efforts. And yeah. All right, so let's dive into the animal part of Parkinson's, the research. So we have some research models here. So how do scientists study Parkinson's in the lab? So they use animal models, as you can clearly see, toxin-based ones like 6-OHDA in rats and MPTP in mice or monkeys, and genetic ones. For example, animals engineered to overexpress asynuclein or carry LARC2 mutations. Massaro and others provide an excellent example of this. These models let us analyze what happens when dopamine neurons die, test new therapies, and understand the disease mechanisms in ways that we couldn't with human subjects. Understanding these models is important because they set the stage for the current research and ethics portion of my talk. Okay. So one of the most recent animal studies on Parkinson's was done by Massaro and colleagues in 2024. They actually looked at how inflammation might speed up brain cell and loss. Might speed might I cannot speak. I'm sorry. Might speed up brain cell loss in rats, and that were generally vulnerable to Parkinson's. The rats overexpressed the human asynuclein protein. That's the same protein that clumps up in the human brains. Um, that I said before. When the researchers exposed these rats to a mild inflammatory agent called LPS, the animals lost dopamine neurons much faster in the substantia nigra and showed stronger movement problems. Um, and that displayed, yeah, stronger movement problems. This is fine. It gave us a clue that inflammation in the body can make the brain's degeneration worse, which connects Parkinson's disease to the immune system. It's one of the first studies to show that inflammation doesn't just accompany the disease, it actually drives it. It's a driven factor for it. And that helps us understand why some researchers are now testing anti-inflammatory drugs as potential Parkinson's treatments. And also, this isn't research or anything, but I was serving at my job, Firebirds, Woodford Grill in New Albany, and I had this couple sitting with me, or like they were my section, and I was talking to them, and the wife, their names were Sean and Emily, and Emily had ALS. She got diagnosed with ALS 1 year ago, and she can't even walk. She has a walker or a wheelchair, and that's just crazy. I mean, what are the chances that an ALS patient, they're from Minnesota. So they drove from Minnesota. They drove like 10 hours from Minnesota to come up here to see a doctor, Dr. Omar. Um, because for her treatment, and it's just crazy to me because what are the chances that an ALS patient happens to get in the section of, and there's 20 other swimmers, and I'm literally learning, I'm studying the brain in cognitive neuroscience. So it's like, it's crazy that she happened to just be in my section. But anyways, I talked to Sean and Emily, and they are here for treatment from Dr. Omar. Dr. Omar works for neuroanimation in New Albany. I didn't even know about this. They told me about it. It's called neuroanimation, and Emily plays these games because she plays these games with like her hand, and like it's like fish. It's like she has to like follow fish and things with her right side of the body because that forces the left side of the brain, and that's the part of the brain that's affected in ALS or in her ALS. But she plays these games and it like forces that side of the brain, and she's already seeing results, and it's crazy. And yeah, I don't know why I'm ranting about that, but I just thought it was cool. That happened 2 days ago or yesterday, Tuesday. But that's just cool. I'm sorry, I'm ranting. Okay. So, ethics in animal research. Obviously, we can't just take any animal we see and test their brains. That's unethical. But whenever animal studies like this one are done, it's critical they follow ethical standards. So, the American Psychological Association's guidelines for ethical conduct in the care and use of non-human animals in research. Oh my God, it's a lot of words. From 2012, lay out exactly how this has to happen. So, basically, they say that researchers must justify the use of animals scientifically, use the smallest number necessary, and minimize pain and distress. Animals must get proper housing, food, and veterinary care, and any invasive procedures have to include anesthesia or pain relief. So in the Massaro Scenere study, the rats would have been monitored under those standards, and their care reviewed by an ethics committee known as an IACUC. These rules make sure that while we gain insights into human disease, we also maintain compassion and respect for the animals that make research like this possible. Okay. Okay. Now that we understand what the disease does and how we study it, let's look at how it's treated today. So the main treatment is levodopa or L-DOPA paired with a helper drug called carbidopa. It boosts dopamine levels in the brain and dramatically improves motor control. Other drugs like dopamine agonist or MAO-B inhibitors can be used earlier or alongside levodopa to smooth out the symptoms. But when medication stops being enough, doctors can use deep brain stimulation, where they implant an electrode that stimulates areas such as the subthalamic nucleus to restore normal movement patterns. So they deep brain stimulation study, they stimulate your brain. It's literally how it is. They stimulate the deep part of your brain. They stick an electrode like this, zzz, and they turn it on and they stimulate that part of the brain to get it working again. And as Gazzaniga and Cooley both explain, these treatments are symptomatic. They don't cure Parkinson's, but or stop it from progressing, but it slows it down, kind of ish. And that's why future research is shifting toward what we call disease modifying therapies, treatments that could actually slow or reverse the damage. Okay. So, what does the future look like for Parkinson's treatment? So, according to an editorial in Nature Reviews Neurology, researchers are focusing on several promising areas. First, are targeting asynuclein, obviously, the protein that I keep on repeating, trying to stop those toxic clumps from forming or spreading. There are antibody drugs being tested right now to neutralize it. Secondly, scientists are looking at ways to reduce inflammation in the brain from the rat study from Massaro in the brain, which connects back to that animal study we just discussed. And third, they want to protect existing dopamine neurons and even help new ones grow. And that includes drugs that enhance cellular repair or shield neurons from oxidative stress. And it's exciting because these therapies aim to change the course of the disease, not just treat the symptoms. Isn't try to just slow it down and try to stop it from going. They could shift Parkinson's from a degenerative condition into something that's manageable long term. Okay, so future goals in cell therapies. Another big frontier is personalized medicine. Um, Basically treatments tailored to someone's genes. Certain mutations like LRRK2 and GBA are responsible for a significant number of Parkinson's cases. So researchers are testing gene therapies that silence or correct those mutations. There's also progress in cell replacement therapy where induced pluripotent stem cells, basically lab-grown dopamine neurons, are transplanted into the brain and restore lost function. And on a much broader scale, scientists are developing biomarkers to detect Parkinson's years before symptoms appear. So interventions can start earlier. And the Nature Reviews Neurology article highlights that combining genetics, early screening, and neuroprotection may finally let us prevent Parkinson's instead of just managing it. And that's the ultimate goal. And that's the ultimate goal to stop the disease before it takes hold. So a visual summary, I kind of want to pull everything together visually so you can kind of see what we're looking at and how the pieces fit. So on this slide, you'll see the basal ganglia circuit, the substantia nigra, and the basic timeline of how Parkinson's progresses. Looking at the basal ganglia diagram, notice how the dopamine from the substantia nigra right there, the D1 and the D2. Notice how the dopamine from the substantia nigra helps the striatum sends the right signals to the motor cortex. When dopamine drops, the motor loop becomes imbalanced. So that imbalance is what leads to slowness, tremors, and rigidity. So you can see the top is a psychological condition, and the Parkinson's is on the bottom. So that direct pathway gets completely cut off. So that D1, that dopamine, there's none of it anymore. So that's where the loss of dopamine comes from. So this is a substantia nigra, this little like heart kind of shape. It highlight this is really I'm trying to get you to focus on the pigmentation of this. So if you look in the image all the way to the right, you can't really compare this to anything, but there's loss of pigmentation there. Obviously, the cerebellum and parts of the brain have been removed, but this is a substantia nigra, and the arrows are pointing to these are where dopamine should be. So this is where dopamine should be. So if you cut off your brain right now, took it off, looked at some substantia nigra, this would be dark because we if you don't have Parkinson's, ideally, but this would be dark because we would have dopamine pigmentation in the middle picture. That's what it would look like on the left. It would be dark right there. And in Parkinson's patients, it's not because they don't have dopamine. And dopamine is what makes it dark. It's pigmented. And then on the left as well, you can kind of see the top right, you see the dopamine getting transmitted from neuron to neuron. And then the bottom right, you can see that there's not much dopamine getting transmitted at all. And yeah. And this is kind of just a progression timeline of Parkinson's. It kind of helps us understand um, how things progress and what happens when. So early Parkinson's symptoms are mild, seen on one side of the body, just one side, you can't move. Symptoms, tremor of one hand, rigidity, clumsy leg, one side of the face may be affected, impacting the expression. Stage two, symptoms on both sides of the body, bilateral involvement at the midline, loss of facial expressions on both sides, blinking slower, talking weird, and your muscles begin to get rigid. Third stage, mid stage of Parkinson's, loss of balance and slower movement, um, inability to make the rapid automatic involuntary adjustments. All the other symptoms of Parkinson's are present. Stage four, it's where it gets pretty severe. Symptoms of Parkinson's are severely disabling. Patients may be unable to walk and stand unassisted, but they are noticeably incapacitated. Um, incapacit incapacitated. Patient is unable to live an independent life and needs assistance. And then five, last stage, inability to rise. Patients fall when standing or turning, may freeze or stumble when walking, hallucinations or delusions. And keep in mind, this happens over, like I said earlier, 15 to 20 years. So it's not, in no way is this happening over 2 weeks. No, this is happening over 15 to 20 years. Like versus ALS, which I was talking about before, she got diagnosed a year ago and she already has a walker. Where here, it doesn't say, you don't really lose your balance is compromised in stage three, but you don't really lose the ability to walk until like stage five or stage 4 to 5. So yeah, it takes a long time and that's frustrating. That is frustrating. I would be frustrated. I would not be happy. Okay. So impact on Parkinson's goes much deeper. When we talk about it, I feel like we only talk about, or when everyone talks about it, we really only talk about the focus on the motor symptoms like dopamine, asynuclein, Lewy body, like things like that. But the impact goes way past that. People with Parkinson's often experience changes in mood, motivation, sleep, and even cognition. These can include slower thinking, difficulty multitasking, and challenges with planning or memory. From a personal standpoint, activities that used to be automatic require more energy and concentration. Tasks like getting dressed, writing, even talking can become tiring over time. And because the disease progresses slowly, individuals and families often navigate years of adjustments, things like changing work routines, moving, managing medications, and adapting their homes for safety. Like I said before, Emily and Sean had to drive 10 hours from Minnesota to see Dr. Omar, and they have to stay in a hotel for 3 weeks and eat out every day and be in the lab for 3 hours a day. So it takes a mental toll. And I think that can arguably be a bigger part of Parkinson's than than the physical than the cortical the brain, the brain part of Parkinson's. What's going on in the brain? Sorry. The combination of physical and cognitive strain also affects family members who frequently serve as caregivers. Caregiver burnout is a real issue, and it reminds us that Parkinson's impacts the entire household, not just one person. And understanding this personal side is important because it shows why research into better treatments and ideally prevention is so meaningful. It's not just about neurons, it's about preserving independence, relationships, and quality of life. So again, this slide is just kind of talking about the ethical research. All animal studies used to understand Parkinson's, including the scenario study I talked about earlier, must follow the APA guidelines for ethical conduct in the care and use of non-human animals in research. Researchers have to take critical care of their animals, or I mean, you could lose the ability to ever research again. Like I said, housing, nutrition, veterinary care, and research, and they must have people trained to handle them safely. Um, Anesthesia and pain relief are required unless there's specifically justified reason otherwise. And even then, it has to be approved by the I or an ethics committee like the IACUC. Um, it's not only important to protect the animals, but to ensure that the science produced is reliable and responsible. Ethical practice and good research go hand in hand, and Parkinson's research depends on both. So following these guidelines isn't really optional. It's kind of part of what makes the entire field of neuroscience trustworthy. Okay, so here are just my APA sources. But to wrap everything up, Parkinson's is a complex neurological condition that affects movement, emotion, cognition through the loss of dopamine neurons and the breakdown of deep brain circuits. We walked through its symptoms, how it progresses, what we know about its causes. We looked at how animal models, when used ethically, help reveal the underlying biology and point to view treatments. We explored future directions, including gene therapy, cell replacement, anti-inflammatory approaches, and disease-modifying drugs that can change the course of this condition. I mean, even though Parkinson's currently has no cure, research is moving in a hopeful direction. Understanding these mechanisms now puts us one step closer to breakthroughs that could prevent or slow the disease in the future. Thank you all for listening. I hope this helped you a lot understand Parkinson's, not just as a disorder, but as a challenge that neuroscience is working every day to solve.